Wait, what kind of government were the Federalists, what did they support? They want. What kind of government? Strong central government. And what did many anti-federalists or people like Thomas Jefferson want written? And they would drop their opposition to the Constitution. What did they want written? A Bill of Rights. So we're right. This is right. This little picture right here. And we call this the Federalist era. What state were the Federalist Papers written? Try to yeah. We don't know if that had the impact. One of my favorite historians is a guy named William Hoagland. I literally just read. He says all little historical things that I like about. Everyone quotes the Federalist Papers, and they actually probably heard the Constitution, which I find kind of amusing. But see, I said the Bill of Rights. Let's get right into it. So let's do the Bill of Rights. So 12 amendments. One disappeared. It was about federal judges. One would be ratified in 1991, and the other 10 would be ratified. When I was a kid growing up, I can still remember my elementary school teacher telling us. It's weird. I remember little things like this. All Bill of Rights have to be 10 amendments. They must be 10. 10 is kind of a magic number, which of course I thought 3 was, but they said 10. Why? We're all like, yeah, 10. There's no reason. It's 10 because 2 weren't ratified. Yeah. Let's look at it. Let's going to look at it. Yeah. You will see the amendment. Yes. What's that? One was about the apportionment of federal judges. And then the other one, I'll tell you the other one because that's the last one. It's the last amendment to be ratified in 1991. And it was, if Congress votes themselves a pay raise. So everyone got that idea? Congress votes themselves a pay raise. They don't get the raise until after an election. That's in the Constitution. So they have to, I voted myself a raise, but I have to go to you, the people, and justify it. Will you send me that? And that's the last amendment. Which, by the way, Congress just simply passes an automatic pay raise every year, so that's kind of routine. We want well paid as a Congress, President, and Cabinet. Want them to be well paid. Why? If they're not, they're open to run. Want them well paid. Now, some are so cheap you don't even need to bribe them, but that's what we want. Okay, so back to this. Let's get to the Bill of Rights. So you see things like, freedom of speech. And I remember this is one of the protests against the Vietnam War and those trying to deprive them of the right to protest. Free speech. And like this, celebrating the First Amendment and freedom. Right? And the First Amendment rights. Well, no. These aren't positive amendments. They're negative. They're not, you have these rights. It's that you can't have them taken away. So let's look at the First Amendment. And by the way, this is law. It's weirdly written. So let's go through it. Because this is kind of a biggie. And the reason I like this one and the Second Amendment is you can see how nuanced, complicated, and really unclear a lot of these amendments are. So it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Did you catch that? It doesn't say you have a right, a freedom of religion. It just says that Congress can't ban your establishment of a religion or your exercise thereof. Is that the same thing as freedom of religion? Because it doesn't define what religion is. So they can say, you got freedom of religion, but what you're practicing is not religion. They define what religion is. Congress defines what religion is. Don't have freedom of religion. Oh, sure, there's an element of freedom of religion. And they can't just simply say, we ban everybody who is a practicing druid. Any practicing druids in here? Which is their religion from ancient Britain. They worship trees. They can't just simply ban one, but they could say, that's not a religion. You can't go up and say, my religion
It's the church stealing money from Russian and asking me, I on standing to practice my religion in 3 periods. Where do you want to join? They could say that's not the religion. But of course, I think you can see it too less ridiculous religions too. So that's a gray area, isn't it? Let's get to the next one. Now, this is it. I'm going to have to show you how it does this. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. You see it now? It doesn't say you have freedom of speech, but they can't simply say, okay, this group of people, all people with green eyes can't speak. Green eyes, that's why I'm including myself. Yes. Stop. Bam. Pass a law. Catch the difference now? It doesn't define what speech is. It doesn't say you have freedom of speech. It just says we can't keep you from speaking, but we can define what speech is. So there's certain things we'll say it's not free speech, which is the law now. You can't say things just because you want to, if it will harm others, put others in danger. And once you say that, couldn't that be almost anything? So it's not a blanket freedom of speech. And one more thing. It says Congress. It doesn't say private individuals. If you're working for somebody and they say, you can't say that in my place of business, you can't say, well, I have the First Amendment right. It doesn't say private business. It says Congress. And so you might not have the freedom of speech you think. Now, there are some laws that could potentially be passed, say you have certain freedom of speech there and not other places, but yeah. You get the point how nuanced it is. It's not blanket. Was that on purpose? Absolutely. First off, partially because they want to be able to control speech in some ways. But secondly, they weren't thinking in terms of everybody have freedom. They were thinking about themselves, and they didn't want laws passed that might infringe them on freedom of speech, which the British tried to do. So, looking back to the revolution. So, very quickly then, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. It doesn't say there's freedom of the press. It just simply says there can be no law saying we're not going to allow certain parts of the press to function. But once again, that gets to free speech. We can decide what is free speech for the press and what isn't. Next, Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to peaceably assemble. Yeah. It's only federal thing. It's not state. Yeah. Now it's kind of complex. The right of the people to peaceably assemble. You can assemble. Do you see the word? Define peaceably. You see the problem? So, for example, in New York City, if there are 2 people wearing a mask on any day other than Halloween or New Year's Eve, that is considered a riot and you could be arrested. Yeah, there are laws against wearing a mask in group in New York City. Now, they don't enforce it that strictly, but that is actually a law. So, for example, during COVID, they had to suspend that law in certain situations, and they did the same thing during the Spanish flu of 1918, 1919. They had to suspend that law for people to wear masks, which, wow. So, peaceably, let's get to the last one. Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to petition government for redress of grievances. So you can petition government. Good, right? You can petition. Do they have to read it? So I can't stop you from petitioning. But doesn't mean it doesn't mean it won't be ignored. That is the gray area of the First Amendment. And so, yes, we say we have freedom of speech, and most people have a justifiable expectation of certain freedoms of speech, but it is not exactly freedom of speech. And it can and has been many times, including right now. Many times. So, freedom of speech, First Amendment. So it's actually really quite complex. Hey, let's get to the second. The second's kind of amazing. The Second Amendment. Madison did not want this. Madison did not want this amendment at all. He did not want this. Didn't want it. He didn't trust states, didn't like him. He would change his tune when he decided he didn't like the Federalists in power. Then he said, no, the states shouldn't have control. But not in 1789 when he first wrote these. So, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No other law or amendment written by this. So it starts out with a statement. Well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, implying this is about militia. And state literally states. Remember, states wanted control of their militia. Everyone knew what they was talking about. But then it goes, the right to the people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. Do you catch the problem with that? So is that the right of the people to keep and bear arms for a militia? What's an arm? What's regulated? What's state? Who are the people? Do you see the issue? Was that on purpose? Yes. He didn't want this. Didn't want this. Now, I put this out of order for reasons I can't explain now, but let me show you the original that he wrote and proposed to Congress, but then they amended it and voted past it. That. That's what Madison originally wrote. So that should tell you his intent. That's it. So Madison was writing about militias. They voted for militias. But do you see why they took out that hunk at the bottom? If they say the right, a well-regulated militia composed of a body of the people, so the people will be in the militia. Everyone catch that? I don't mean individual people, I mean the people. We the people, that makes sense? The people. Okay. Now the militia, but no one religiously scrupulous. We would say a conscientious objector today. Of bearing arms shall be compelled to render military service in person. Meaning, those who religiously scrupulous do not have to join the militia. But this implies that if you're not religiously scrupulous, what must you join? It's implying like a conscription or draft. That amendment applies that you must join the militia. And that's not at all what they want. They still wanted the militia to be voluntary. So what did they do? They took that. And that's why we get this weird thing we have now. That's the explanation. That's what happened. That's what happened. So let's look at a couple other weird things about this. What does regulated mean in 1789? Yes. Maintained, yeah. And so if you're going to maintain a militia, that means a well-trained, well-equipped militia. Not a bunch of yahoos running around with rifles shooting up in the air. A well-regulated and trained militia, which has to be done by Congress. That's in the Constitution. Hey, what's our militia today? What's our well-regulated militia today? National Guard created in 1877. They were calling it the militia National Guard before that, but the one we know of today was 1877, after a near revolution. So, that's trained. Security of a free state, literally states, the right of the people. Of the people. What's an arm? I'm glad I asked second period about war. Or thank you for not doing that. Arm at its very particular meaning. Very particular meaning. Does anybody want to suggest an arm? You had to do it. You had no choice. Yeah. Some are, some aren't. an armory, like a personal armory or a state armory? State armory. Interesting. Do you have one?
I guess.
Some are, some aren't.
Some.
What kind of weapons are owned by the state? Weapons for the military. So some must, right? In an armory. An armory is where the state holds weapons for the militia. What is it? Like cannon, right? You know. Hunting rifle, especially then, was not good for military. It took about 2 minutes or 3 minutes to load. Because the muscle had to be really tight fit. So you had to kind of almost like screw it in. Because it was a muzzle loader. That's not good for the military. You want heavy duty but inaccurate, because they're heavy duty, so have to be loaded fast weapons. It's not good for personal use. Knives, only if it's a bayonet. So military weapons, that's an all. That's an all. That's what they were talking about. And so up until 2008, the court ruled, and it was just the way it was, that this is all about militia. And so states do have control over personal weapons. They can decide whether or not, which comes in conflict with the Ninth Amendment, which I'll get to in a second. Big conflict with the Ninth. But back to this, there's always about militia. And they ruled dozens of times the Supreme Court. And then in 2008, they overturned that decision and said, this, yes, it's about a militia, but it's also a little bit about personal weapons. That's where we're at. When I was a kid, there was nobody walking around with machine guns. They would have been arrested immediately. Now, I've seen somebody walk into a coffee shop with a machine gun. I guess they must have some real issues. They must really lack self-esteem, but that's another story. I'll show you I'm tough. Look at my gun. But that's where we're at now. But you know why we have this problem? It's confusing. So there's some people who will say the Second Amendment by the Founding Fathers, that was muskets, not the modern weapons today. It wasn't about what people had. It was militia. And here's the people that the Second Amendment is to protect the people with guns to protect from tyranny, the potential tyranny, a tyrannical government. Madison would never have thought his government would be tyrannical. So actually, a lot of the arguments for and against the Second Amendment or for and against controls on weapons are wrong. But the big issue, it was state power. They're telling the states you can have your militia, especially southern states, because of the fear of slave rebellion. And that's where you get to, is it regulated militia or personal weapons? And we're not clear on that. Because weapons that are now allowable for personal use were not allowable when I was a kid. Nobody would have wanted them. It's interesting how culture around weapons have changed. You know, like weapons with ammunition that are specifically designed for military use. That's it. It just, no one had those in the 1980s, in the 70s. But you can't have a thermonuclear bomb either. Don't tell me, well, maybe. If you do, let's just go talk to somebody. But that's an arm. You know, you can't have an ICBM in your basement. I would keep it in the silo in your backyard. All right. What's an ICBM? Yeah, all those missiles around Great Falls. There's 100 of them. You go to Great Falls, you actually drive by one. You're all. Go shake on the fence. You make lots. Yeah. You have a missile? Anyway.
Say activation, like incomplete or something. You drive by them. Like, do you want to try again? They're like, no, stop.
No. I wonder whatever their system has, it must be part of their security system. But yeah, I know someone who, when they were a dumb high school student, no offense. There's a lot of dumb adults too. Probably more, a lot more. But anyways, they climb one of the fences. That'll be fun. he disappeared for 2 days. They took him and scared him to death and he produced it. So that's it. DC versus Heller is actually the court case that overturned. It's a big deal. And I'm fascinated by it because I do have a rifle and a pistol. They're both black powder. But actually one is, roughly a black powder Navy pistol from 1848. But that's certainly different than weapons that a lot of people. Only about 25% of Americans actually have weapons, which is kind of weird for Montana because it's about 70%. But, all right, moving on. We're jumping right to this. Let's go to Amendment 3. Well, all we need to know Amendment 3 is just put down no quartering of troops. Remember quartering of troops because of the Townsend Act? Remember the Boston Massacre? That's directly because of the Revolutionary War. Next, Amendment 4 is a biggie. I bold what you need to know. No unreasonable searches and seizures without a what? Which is a court order signed by a judge. But do you know the problem with that? Do you see the big loophole? Do you see it? Yeah. Define unreasonable. Well, who defines it? The executive. So that could be any number of things. There's also another loophole. What if you never know they searched you? They call it a sneak and peek. Where they just come in and look and leave. I'm not saying they're that good, but it's like one of those where you come in and like, who's moved? This was especially after what's called the Patriot Act, after September 11th, which we will get to. Some of you might have heard of that term. Next, let's get to Amendment 5. Now, there's lots of things about Amendment 5. For example, you can't be tried for the same offense, no dictionary yet, offense twice. So they can't arrest you, try you for a crime, and if you're acquitted, arrest you and try you for the same crime. But of course, if you pay any attention to indictments, they never charge you with one crime. They always charge you with multiple for that reason. And there's another one. You cannot be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, so against yourself. Has anyone ever watched like a TV show, a movie, and they say, I plead the fifth? That's the fifth. You can't be forced to testify against yourself. I do know a lot of people. I know of people who have been arrested, and I've heard people say this, well, your spouse can't testify against you either. I'll bet. You want to bet? Next, here's the biggie, the one you have to. This is one of the most important parts of the Constitution. You cannot be, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without, and everybody get down, due process of the law. So you can't be arrested. You can't be put in jail. You can't have your property taken away unless it goes through a legal process. And what do we call that legal process? It's called, this is the other thing you have to get, habeas corpus. So you might have heard of habeas corpus. It means essentially like the body or with the body. Yeah. Yeah, still five. Five's a big one. So they just pack a bunch of stuff in it. But the most important due process of the law. So meaning, you just can't, the state, whether it be, well, then it was only the federal government, now it is the state, local, and federal government, can't just simply arrest you and hold you without a trial. They can't arrest you and not tell you why they're arresting you. They still do sometimes, but at least sometimes they're supposed to. That's habeas corpus. You must know why you're arrested. You must know what you're accused of, and you cannot be held indefinitely without a trial. That's a big deal. You are guaranteed the right of habeas corpus. Due process of the law is huge. But then it only applied to the federal government. It would not be until after the Civil War where it would apply to states. Next, Amendment 6. We're not going to go through every detail about it. All you need to know, two things. Speedy and public trial and assistance of counsel. For me?
It is. Your class was lovely.
Not for me. Not for me. So. But define speedy. Anybody know about the court system today? You know how long you have to wait for a trial? I mean, it's routine to wait a year. If it's a criminal case that's complex, 2 years. I know someone who had to wait 3 years for a criminal case. I know them, I know what they're accused of, I know what was going on. And then they finally took a plea. So, speedy's relative. I guess in the whole span of time of the planet Earth, a year is pretty quick. And then assistance to counsel. Originally, this was just thought of, you can have a lawyer, but if you can't afford it, whatever. Assistance to counsel today, in most states, there are, this is because the Supreme Court ruled 63 years ago that the state must provide you if you can't afford an attorney for criminal cases. So that's assistant attorney. But if you know anything about public defenders, they are incredibly overworked and underpaid. That's a hard job. And so the effectiveness of that counsel can be limited by just how overworked they are. Let's get to number 8 really quick. No cruel and unusual punishment. Let's get to 7 first. Okay. If suits in common law, we'll get an attorney. Suits in common law will you can have a jury trial. What's a suit in common law? A lawsuit. Civil cases. So like lawsuits. And when it says $20, okay, it's about $2,500 now. So big cases, there can be a jury trial for lawsuit. Small case, have you ever heard of small claims court? That's below the set amount, which is now, okay, $20 then was a lot of money. But basically saying there is a trial. Thank you for reminding me of that one. Yes, I know I'm going fast. We're just trying to get a baseline. 8. Oh. Britain was arresting people, holding them without trial, searching. They were holding them in these reeking prison ships. So that's why that's the due process of the law. That's why there's assistance to counsel. That's why there's fraud. Britain was doing writs of assistance, which are blanket search warrants without a warrant. That's why the Fourth Amendment. Suits in common law, that was about suing British citizens with just please. 8. Don't worry about bail, just put down cruel and unusual punishment. Sounds good, right? Well, first off, our whole system of jail, penitentiaries, prisons has not been created yet. That's a factor of the Industrial Revolution. So it's going to begin in Britain and come to the US. Also, can anyone define cruel for me? I bet all of us can define it. And I bet it'd be different for each one of us. So that's really hard to define. And also, it could be what you think is cruel right now could be significantly different if something happens to you personally. You might be more cruel than, and define unusual. Wow. What does that even mean? So it's there, but it's hard to define. I should ask. This comes up to a really important question. Should the state be allowed to murder? Is that cruel or unusual? And we could all come, well, what about the crime? Okay, but still murder people. That's an argument. And if something happens to me personally, my opinion might change. Yeah.
So it says cruel and unusual, that's cruel more.
It's one thing more like handle. But even then, what does that even mean? You know, is it less cruel to murder somebody with chemicals than impaling them on a stick? Killing. That's the issue. All right. And then 9. This is the one I said where personal weapons might actually have, and it is part of the DC versus Heller decision. So the Constitution has certain rights, but the people have rights even if they're not enumerated. You have rights, they don't need to be listed. You have rights. Obviously, not every right is listed. If it's not listed, you have that right. But once again, these are so broad, it can be hard to define. But that's where personal weapons, without a doubt. But then once again, what's a personal weapon? What's the rules of the state? And then 10, same deal. Powers not delegated to the Constitution, go to the states. So if the power doesn't go to the national government, it goes to the state. Basically, 10th Amendment's Federalist. But remember the necessary and proper clause, the elastic clause. Does that sound familiar to everybody? That leads to a gray area. That's the Constitution. I mean, that's the Bill of Rights. And most of them are kind of negative. They can't do, it's not you have. And you notice, a couple of things are really important. It doesn't say citizens. It's just the people, persons. It does not say citizens. If you're a person in the United States, regardless of any details of why you're here, according to the US Constitution, you have due process of the law. You have the protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. It's the people, the persons. It doesn't say citizens. Now, they did that for a very important reason, because they didn't define citizenship, and they would have just meant men, white men probably, but also women. It was very confusing. That's our situation today. And it's only federal. Did not apply to the state until the most important part of the US Constitution was ratified. They're called the Reconstruction Amendments, and it's the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment said that the Bill of Rights applies to the states. Everyone got that? That's not until 1868. I was just a little kid when that happened, but I can still remember the changes that came about because of that. You like my postcard of the Bill of Rights? I love the cartoonish version of the Bill of Rights. Right? A person accused of a crime. You will be imprisoned. Maybe not so happy things. So, that's the Bill of Rights. Let's get to what's happening. While the Bill of Rights are being debated, they literally had to create the government. They had to create it from scratch. And the first thing they did is Washington had to kind of create the presidency. And this might not sound like a big deal, but it really was. What do you call him? Is he Your Excellency? Your Highness? And in the Constitution, it says there can be no titles of nobility. We don't want kings. Fight against kings. So what do you call him? Washington decided on Mr. President. And that has been the term from now on. So be Mr. President, and there's been no woman has been president yet, which is interesting considering the fact that it's nearly 55% of the population. Of course, they're not guaranteed equal rights in the Constitution anyways. That's kind of a hole, don't you think? I'll get to the rest of that a little bit later. That would be madness. So, Mr. President, Washington served 2 terms, partially out of exhaustion, partially because he's being called a traitor by the other party. Yeah, once again, you think we have political rancor now, which arguably yes. They're calling George Washington a traitor, the other party. And of course, Washington's party was returning and calling Thomas Jefferson a traitor, the author of the Declaration of Independence. What a time, huh? Next, the court system was created. Now, Washington didn't do it, but he signed the law. This is a really important law. The Judiciary Act of 1789 created the modern court system. Federal courts, courts of appeals, and the Supreme Court. Our basic legal system today was created in 1789. Let's wait about 5 minutes. It's created about 1789. In fact, maybe go down. Get it down. I have no idea what it is. Yeah. So, but that's a good thing. Do you want the legal system to be consistent? And the term is kind of like old fashioned, anachronistic. Because that means you always know what's gonna happen tomorrow. You can't prepare for tomorrow if things are changing and turbulent today. And boy, can you ever prepare if the laws change every day? If the rules change every day? What do? What people do is they sit on their money, they sit and they don't do anything. So, next. The Constitution says it'll create a cabinet, it'll be advising consent of the Senate. So what did Washington do? Based on the British parliamentary cabinet, he created a cabinet and they decided the Senate will confirm. So the Senate votes up or down. That's how they do the constitutional requirement of advice and consent. And most of the time, it's a pretty straightforward thing. It's not so straightforward anymore. Now, he created technically five, but four cabinet level positions. And the most important of the two you need to know. Copying the British Secretary of State, he created the Secretary of State, the State Department, and I think that's Jefferson. Everyone looks the same in this picture. Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson's State Department. In Britain, the State Department dealt with the actual processes within the state, everything from the legal, security, that's inside the state. In the US, it was both inside the state and foreign policy. Now, add this if you did not know, the State Department in the US, it's foreign policy, pure foreign policy. And then he put it with a rival, they hated each other, the Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton. Washington still had never forgiven Hamilton, but he also saw talent that Hamilton clearly had. And Washington did not really understand the finances. He thought Hamilton did, even though he didn't trust him. This is all new. Treasury Secretary. Now add the other two. He created two more departments. Don't worry about the name, just put down the other two. The other two, one is he created the Attorney General. What do we call the department that the Attorney General heads today? Anyone know? It's called the Justice Department. So great justice. Now, first, the Attorney General, Edmund Randolph, which is right here, they thought he might be like the president's lawyer, but also the nation's lawyer, but that's clearly a conflict of interest. So today, by law, the Attorney General has to be separate from the administration because it could be conflict of interest. The executive branch's lawyer is called a Solicitor General, and then the president can have personal lawyers. But today, that's kind of blurry. And so there has been times where there's been a conflict of interest where the Attorney General seemed to be very close to the president, which is clearly like that. You say that's sort of bad, but it's happening. The best example of that was when John Kennedy was president. Does anybody know who John Kennedy's Attorney General, therefore the head of the Justice Department, was? His brother. Which is a shocking conflict of interest, Robert Kennedy. Whose son is now the head of Health and Human Services. John Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. Robert Kennedy was assassinated in 1968. Once again, turbulent times. Turbulent times have happened many times in our history. Oh, and then the other department is this, right down the War Department. So create the War Department. About 8 years later, they would create the Navy Department. So everyone got that? Those are the four departments. We have State, Treasury, War, Justice, Attorney General. And after World War II, they merged the War and Navy Department together into one, called the Department of Defense. And President Trump is now calling the Defense Department the War Department. But he can't change the name because that's done by Congress, unless things radically change about what checks and balances. So that's what we have today. And then another one he gave was a farewell address. Washington, he didn't actually give an address. He printed a copy of his speech or his statements, and then they issued them to newspapers and members of houses.
And now every president does this when they leave office. Basically, most of them are, I did great as president. But there are a couple that had impact, like Washington, which we'll get to. The other really important one is the Dwight Eisenhower in 1961, which we'll get to in April. And all presidents do that. Now, also every president gives an address. Used to be the same thing. It was just simply a speech. But back then, it was just they would give out a statement called the State of the Union. But that's in the Constitution. That's presidents. So let's get to the big thing, economics. And that is Alexander Hamilton's influence over the Treasury. He had a vision for the United States. A vision of what kind of country. And this is part of the thing that would happen where Madison and Jefferson had a totally different vision. He would write two booklets, pamphlets called The Report on Credit and The Report on Manufacturers. Now, manufacturers means industry. He is just reading about these new wondrous power looms for textile in Britain, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And he's going, that is our future, to be like Britain. These are going to have great impact, great impact. So what does it mean? Government policy should, this is supposed to be class, you didn't put it behind, should be to funnel money, to get money to the financial elite, the merchant class, those who bought bonds, the creditors. Now you notice the financial elite, I said merchant class. I did not say the elite wealthy plantation owners. I said the merchant class. Why? They will take that money because they know how to make money. They're smarter than most people. Hamilton would have made it very clear. They're better. They should make up the government of the better sort and not the riffraff. They will invest in manufacturing and finance. They will start building factories, which are brand new. So he's envisioning this future, but also the banks. Pieces of company are called stocks. We've talked about this before. And of course, bonds, manufacturing and finance. And he also wanted a very strong standing military to be paid by this. He was very much a militarist. He wanted in many ways a military state, partially because he didn't want another Shays. And remember, Shays' rebellion that led directly to the Constitution. Hamilton's vision was no small farmers. You would have this group of the vast majority of people, not the elite, who would work in the new factories for low wages. And that's what he saw the people. And they might resist and think they have rights. So what do you need? An army to put them down. So he's thinking many more shades of rebellion. He did not believe that individual people had equal rights. They're workers. Low-wage workers. And he wants them compliant and not complain about it, so you need a standing military. Hamilton's an interesting guy. Now, this is Hamilton, but this would be the roots of what in the next century, through today, will be called conservative economics. Has everyone got that? So my expectation is this, I will put Hamiltonian economics as one of the things you're going to have to short ID. And this is the basis of conservative economics. You have to know this, have no details about it. It's kind of a big deal. Hamilton is the father of modern conservative economics. Now, the most famous name for conservative economics, has anyone ever heard the term trickle-down economics? Have you heard that term? That's what conservative economics is. With the idea is the wealthy know how to invest to make money. So if they had more wealth, they would build factories and hire workers, thus the money would trickle. We'll get to liberal economics, but liberal economics is more working class, raise wages, put more purchasing power in the hands of greater. Conservative economics, focus government policy to put money in the hands of the very wealthy. Hey, what are we today? Are we this today? Oh, gosh.
We have one of the most conservative presidents in American history. Right now. All you have to do is look at those tax policies. It is specifically designed to funnel money to the top 1%. In fact, his tax policy, the tax bill passed in the summer and his tariffs mean that about 65% of Americans are actually having a tax increase. But the top 1% is having an average of about $100,000 a year tax cut. Why? They're the ones who involved the most. That's the idea. So you pay more, regular people to enable invest. At least that's the idea. Doesn't mean they have to invest. No, they can build a gold gilded toilet seat, but that's the idea of it. That's conservative economics. We've been conservative your whole life. Your whole life. We've always had conservative economics. Always. So if you look at the United States today, that's the product of conservative economics. And you can say that's good or bad thing, but that's where we're at. One more thing. So he has 3 big policy planks, and these are all really important. Number 1, everybody write down the assumption of debts. That comes from the report on credit. This is also called the debt assumption bill. I always called it the assumption bill. When I was in school, I remember in college, the assumption bill. I can still remember my favorite professor talking about the assumption bill and getting really fired up, which I was very impressed with. I was very impressed with that. I always admired him. The ability to find something interesting in almost everything. I admire him. So we'll come right back to this. We'll start right there. Sound good? Hey, what do we have? We have a quiz tomorrow. Don't want to quiz tomorrow. Oh, we're gonna have one, but I forgot we have that assembly and pep assembly. And I'm not saying that's a really good thing, but it's just we have everything together in one. So people want to go to something really good, but they never time. It's a really good thing. That's decorating really cool. We have a bunch of stuff together. You understand? That is the thing you said. Hey everyone, I'm begging you. Have a great Thursday. We'll see you. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Oh, I couldn't see what it was. I couldn't see this. I saw it back in the van. I didn't see what it was. Somebody's been disappeared. You got it, figure. Yeah, it's one of those, I'm sure it's no big deal, but no.
Take me on my surroundings.
As slow as possible.
Take me on my surroundings.
Someone had to leave.
You know what? Rewrite your entire essay language.
Not moving for salary.
And
Really quick.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you guys in there, what?
speaking of ghosts,
You need
someone knows it.
I don't. Oh, I
Look at
know.
your other project.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We have more people on crutches. I thought we should all go on crutches.
No, no, okay.
Elena's
I
thinking
was
that she's taking her.
I still got another month. Oh, my mistake. Dang, I got 6 with this
Yeah.
year. Yeah, I don't think I'm making that.
You're alive.
I mean.
Fella.
No, we're gonna cut her leg off.
It's just gone.
This is nothing.
Well, that's really good. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah.
It was.
It's a big difference, but I'm really.
Tom, I'm watching you.
Yes, you did. No, I did not. So that like, it's like to reply to a link and then like.
You missing 3 different assignments in this class? So. In math, I'm like a foot. Oh, hand the rubber, no.
Yeah.
Why? I think it's just like.
What did, wait, was this the revolutionary war?
Why didn't it?
Ready to go to work papers. Yeah, like the one with the movie?
Maybe.
Oh, you didn't turn that in?
I was there for the movie.
Jesus, what are we doing?
I'm not watching that movie online. I will take it. No, I'm surprised I don't have an F so far. So.
Responsibility though, right? Oh, we're filming. Yay.
What all? Let's check this out.
I see some.
These look good, don't they?
They do look good, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's the kind of generosity that I should go reward. I'll reward that by going through your lunch every day and taking stuff.
Okay, thank you.
They